recently, I think probably about 4 years ago, the city took over that job, which was really wonderful. So now the city buys all of the Victorian baskets, not only for Harvard Square, but throughout, along. Sure how many baskets the city buys now, but there are hundreds and hundreds of baskets, and then they water them every day.
I'm going to just welcome you to Unplanned, the show about cities and how they work. I'm Sam, your host. And today on Unplanned, we have a wonderful guest in a wonderful location. We are going to talk about Harvard Square, one of the most iconic places in all of North America, with none other than Denise Jillson, who's the executive director of the Harvard Square Business Association. Denise, welcome to Unplanned.
I love it. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, it's so kind of you to be here. And we're out here. It's middle of July.
Yep.
It's actually Bastille Day today.
Look at that.
And we're sitting here in these wonderful Adirondack chairs. And people are walking past us, and we wanted to talk about the square. I will apologize about the sound up front. There are lots of cars and trucks and buses, and we're right in the middle of the city. First of all, how's your summer been so far?
Summer has been lovely, really lovely.
And I wanted to come to Harvard Square because it is, as I was saying, one of the most iconic places in all of North America. And you have a particular perch, a particular place from which you view all of the activity that goes on in the square. And why don't you just tell us a little bit about your organization and what it is, and also who you are,
Sure. So the organization is the Harvard Square Business Association, founded in 1910, formerly the Harvard Square Business Men's Association. And as we approach, suffrage day coming up in August, that's sort of an important thing to think about, right? Renamed in the 70s to the Harvard Square Business Association, the mission is to promote commerce in Harvard Square. We added the tagline some 15 years ago, while being good stewards of the public space, taking care of the people and the public space.
And there's so much in what you've just described, both the commercial aspect of the square. One thing we didn't mention, but it's in the name, is its proximity to one of the world's most famous universities, and frankly, one of the wealthiest universities, probably on the globe, but also being good stewards of the public space. Let's get into each one of those a little bit. Let's focus on the business side first. It's in the name of the organization that you run.
Sure.
What is your perspective on economic activity in this very iconic historical place?
Well, there's been a lot of economic activity, and it probably started around 1636 when the university was founded, a full 140 years before we became a country. And with Harvard being just, a block from where we are, the business district, there's always been a small mercantile or a small little general store to meet the needs of the students and the faculty and the visitors coming to the school. So the business district has grown from maybe one singular building in the early 1600s to what it is today, which is essentially 44 acres, about a million plus square feet of space, a combination of retail, restaurants, service providers, professional businesses, as well as entertainment venues and cultural organizations. And within the 44 acres, the retail level, so the street level businesses, there are about 350. And of the 350 or so, on any given day, over 70% of them are still locally owned independent. Here's another interesting little piece of art. as you can see, the little puppet. This is Dodo, and this was, a street performer by the name of Igor Fokin. And back in the 80s, Igor was a puppeteer here in Harvard Square, and a beloved puppeteer. And there's a beautiful YouTube video that you could Google Igor Fokin, Fokin, and watch the magic, the sheer magic that he created with his puppets. And sadly, he had 3 children. He was a Russian immigrant and was on the subway going home one evening and had a heart attack and died really young, probably in his late 30s. So the community came together and worked with the city to raise the funds to have this beautiful little piece of art in memory of Igor Fokin.
What can you tell us? For a long time, at least as I've been involved in some of these conversations, there's been a lot of discussion about the desire, the economic reality that sometimes the rents go too high. A bank is the only person or organization that's willing to pay that rent for whatever reasons, or a cell phone store. And that local proprietor, business owner is basically forced out of a place like Harvard Square. I know that you do a lot of work in that. What can you tell us about that?
So I can tell you that there's a difference between perception and reality, because I'm here to tell you, as I mentioned before, that over 70% are still locally owned independent. And when you look around and you see places, even from where we're sitting, right? So there's, Kenzie Nail Salon right there, and right beside it is Charlie's, and then around the corner is the Red House, and across the street is Grendel's Den, and right over here is Plan B Salon and Flash Print and Hunt's Video, all of which are locally owned independent. Over here is Flower. As we look around in the Harvard Square Hotel, they're all sort of in these little nooks and crannies, right? So there is the reality, and then there's this perception, because when you do come to the main intersection of Mass Ave, as what we call the super crosswalk, Mass Ave, Brattle Street and JFK, and you look around, you do see a fair number of banks. And I would say that, that's probably a good thing, because it means that there's a need, that people have, money, they need to transact business. So the fact that we have 11 banks included in the 44 acres is, not a bad thing. What we have done to help with the perception, so that when people come in and if they see all these banks, they think, oh, that's the only thing that can be in Harvard Square. Recently, we worked with the Harvard Square Neighborhood Association to develop a zoning petition that limits the frontage of banks and financial institutions to 25 feet, so that we no longer have a situation as we have right now today with, for instance, the Bank of America, which I believe this is one of the busiest Bank of America branches in the United States. But it has, nearly over 70 feet of linear store of frontage. So when you look and you think, my goodness, that's a big bank. So there are ways to counter that sort of thing. I have a friend who lives over on Mount Auburn, and she called and she said her name is Linda Levine, and she's a local artist, and she said to me, Denise, I have this upright piano, and I'd really like to get rid of it, and it's quite good. Can you use it? And I said, sure. So we called this company, I can't believe it, but the name is Death Wish Movers. And they went and they picked up the piano from her second story, living room on Mount Auburn Street, and brought it over and put it here. And then we worked with another local artist. Her name is Alex. Alex loves art, and she came and painted the piano so that it's kind of fun and interesting, and people just enjoy it every day.
And are there concerts? People come and play and just...
all the time, Sam. I'm surprised there isn't anybody here right now, actually. The other thing that I will say about, you mentioned rents, and rents are so important, right? There are two things about them. One is that we have, many, I might say, property owners who understand the value that the unique independent store or restaurant brings to Harvard Square. And there's a lot of benevolence going on when you look at the storefronts, particularly along Mass Avenue, and you see places like, the Harvard Bookstore, which was founded in, 1932, or Felix Julie Pier, founded in 1913, or Lebanon Pierce, that was founded in 1882. And you think to yourself, well, you know, if he's been here since 1882, there's something interesting going on there, right? And the rents must not be too high.
So how do these issues that you've described, and we could go into any one of them and dig deeper, but how do they relate back to your day job? So where do you fit in all that conversation? And what are some of the things that you feel you need to get yourself involved in as these kind of conversations go on? Because actually, what you have in Harvard Square is kind of a microcosm of what's happening in cities across the country. I would say Harvard is maybe on the high end because the values are so high around here. But it's really what every city deals with, which is how do you have a vibrant retail environment if that's what you're going for?
Sure.
And where would you fit into that whole conversation?
So I think where we fit in is promoting commerce in Harvard Square, so sticking to our mission. And the way you promoted commerce in 1910 is vastly different than the way you promote it in 2022, but nonetheless, the mission hasn't changed. And that's really important for people to understand, like, how does this organization, how did it survive 112 years? And I think part of it was that is such a broad statement in such a simple statement. So as long as you change with the time, so you could not have even imagined, maybe even 20 years ago, that the way we would be promoting commerce in Harvard Square today is through something called Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. So really moving with the times and making sure that you have that, but also understanding that there's human nature and people want to come together. So creating spaces like this space that we have here where people can gather, because people still want to do that. That hasn't changed, Sam. So for us, it's making sure that the square is clean, safe, welcoming to all, fun, family friendly, because we want everybody to be here. It's not just about the students, although the students are an important part of it, right? But so are the families that live in the neighborhood, so are the guests that come from across the globe to visit the university, so are the unhoused people who make up, indeed, the fabric of our community. They're all important. So we need to make sure that I see my job as all-encompassing in that, yes, we applied for a grant to get these great chairs. We have these beautiful flowers hanging from the lampposts, banners that are on the lampposts, little seating areas, tables, chairs, umbrellas, planters, artwork, public art, making sure that all of it is clean, that we work closely with the city, with the CPD.
He was mayor, city manager, city councilor, city solicitor, justice of the trial court, Canterbridgean, known throughout the Commonwealth as DeGoog, and his word was his bond.
Was there any job he didn't hold?
Apparently not. Apparently not.
Well, let's spend a second on that interaction with the city, because this is also a very interesting part about how cities work, which is that even in a well-functioning city like Cambridge that's well-funded and well-staffed and really pays attention and does its very best to do a good job, they can't do it all. There's simply no way any city can do it all. So you're here as a private, a 501c3, I assume, is
yes.
And so...
C6.
A C6. But what is that interaction with the city like? I imagine that there's some cooperation and sometimes there's a little bit of push and pull. How does all that work?
Beautifully, really beautifully. Truly, the relationships that have been developed, part of it is that, again, you're dealing with an organization that's been around the block a few times, right?
Right.
So this relationship that the association has, not only with the university, but with the city, and we all work together with the same goals and the same ideals, and sort of the same respect for the place, because we know that it's really special. I mean, there are lots of special places in the world. Let's just put that out there, right?
Sure.
I mean, if you travel at all, you come to a lot of special places, but this is indeed a special place because of our proximity to the university. If it wasn't for Harvard, we would just be another nice town on the East Coast, right? but that does bring it to a different level. We all recognize that in the city agencies. I the amount of cooperation that they provide, particularly around the safety issue and community policing in a way that is so impressive. Because, there was a lot of uprisings after the George Floyd murder, and people wanted to defund the police, and there was a lot of questioning about where does Cambridge stand in all of this. And the 8 can't wait. Cambridge had already accomplished 7 out of the 8 goals.
And 8 can't wait is a set of principles or goals that police departments should adopt and practice. I understand.
Yes, and Cambridge had already adopted 7 out of the 8 before that horrendous situation.
Across the street, you'll see there's a mural. You can only see half of it because the door is open, but another piece of artwork. And that was really, again, going back to how do you manage urban spaces, but it was a metal door, very plain, and it was tagged with graffiti 3 times a week. And, we would paint it, the property owner would paint it, and then 2 days later it would be tagged, painted, a day later it would be tagged. So finally I said, we should just do a mural. So we hired a local kid from Cambridge who was a very good artist, and he put that mural, and it was interesting because we did this last October. And, when Nick said to me, Denise, what would you like the mural to look like? I said, how about sunflowers? And then, of course, we didn't know then.
Lo and behold,
what sunflowers would mean to all of us throughout the world as we suffer through, the Ukrainian crisis.
What are some of the big burning issues that are on your plate right now to help us understand some of the things that you feel, oh gosh, we really have to work on this. We got to work through this issue. What's one or two that...
So, so we have, there are fun issues, right? And then there are serious issues. So the fun issues are, how do we continue to promote this place in the, I don't want to say post, but the waning COVID era, right? And how do we continue to safely bring people together so that we can have the festivals? And we run over 100 a year. The big ones, of course, are Oktoberfest and Mayfair. But within that, there are dozens of little events that happen every single month. And some of them are, bring 50 or 60 people together, a couple of hundred people. Some might bring 2,000 people. And then, of course, the big festivals that bring, 100,000 people together. So there's that. So trying to do it safely in a way that people feel comfortable coming to the square still. So that's sort of the fun stuff. The burning issues, they're big issues that affect our property owners, and it's the serious stuff. So it's like the BUDO that we spoke about, which is
and tell us what that is.
The building energy usage issue, where the city is requiring us to reach net zero by 2050, and right now there's a proposal on the table to bring it down to 2035, which would be...
And yes, I'm going to, because I know this is a tricky issue and it's difficult, and there's a lot of politics around it that will make it even more difficult. I think it's fair to say, I'm going to speak for myself here, it's a goal that we all understand has to happen. The question is just, how do you get there?
Right.
I think that's really the issue.
Absolutely. There's no question that people, that climate change is a real thing. It's how do you do it, and how do you do it so that you can achieve your goals and do it while understanding the complications involved in retrofitting these buildings that, some of them like this, maybe from the 80s, but we have buildings from, the 1800s and the 1900s and, the early 20th century. And we need to be, really figuring that out. So that's a big issue that we're working on right now. Linkage is another big issue. Yeah. We're talking about linkage and
linkage is the principle that if you're building a large building, again, I'm just going to speak for myself here because these are difficult issues, and you are asking for concessions from the city or from the community more broadly in height or in some zoning relief that you the way we used to phrase it, that you be a good community partner.
Yes.
And what that often translates into is you make monies available for other purposes other than just the benefit of your own building.
Yes.
So what are some of the issues on linkage?
So linkage right now is at about $22
Okay.
square foot, and the proposal on the table is to move it from 22 to 33, which is, a lot of money. And it's, there's money needed for affordable housing, and I don't think there's a person in this community or in this region that wouldn't say that it's a critical issue, because it absolutely is. But there's also a tipping point for developers. So
Well, I will say, and we're not gonna get it, but when I was more active in politics, there was a discussion about raising the linkage fee then.
Yes.
And that same issue came up of where is that tipping point?
Yes.
At what point have you pushed it too far that it just becomes too expensive and it's frankly not worth it anymore?
Yep.
It did get pushed up, and business seemed to keep on keeping on. So,
but I think, what we saw, though, is the kinds of buildings that were built. So it was buildings that, a lot of lab buildings went up. And so it was, antithetical to what we were really looking for, which is more housing. And then, of course, you have that 20% that would go to affordable. So there is a tipping point.
right.
And we just need to be aware of it. But over here, we have this really interesting plaque for Tom Magliazzi. And Tom, as you know, with his brother Ray, were the Tappet brothers, also known as Click and Clack. They have an office here in Harvard Square where they...
Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe.
Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. And, yeah. And...
When did this plaque go up?
So-
I'm a big fan of these guys.
Yes. So Tom passed in 2014, and I think it was in 2019 that we worked with his family and the city to create this plaque, and this was his favorite car. And
Do we know by any chance what the car
Yeah,
is?
it's a Ford.
That's
I believe
incredible.
it's a Ford. and like a 1954 or something like that.
it was his favorite car. He liked the red one, so we had this big celebration of his life when we dedicated the plaque, and we had that car, that physical car, was out here. We found one and rented it for the evening, and we served pasta to everybody and had a beer garden and celebrated his life,
That is so
which was really
incredible.
lovely. And then over here, there's another plaque to yet another street performer here in Harvard Square, and his name, he was known as Brother Blue. And I don't know if you remember Brother Blue.
I do remember Brother
But
Blue.
he
yeah.
was, just he and his lovely wife Ruth, they came here and told wonderful stories.
He was a performer and a poet and a philosopher, and just a kind, loving guy. And we dedicated this plaque to Brother Blue on the what would have been his 100th birthday. He had passed already, but Ruth was still living, and she attended the event, and we did it during COVID, so it wasn't an enormous event. I think we probably had about 100 people, and people socially distanced, but it was really important for us to dedicate it on his 100th birthday. So just another street performer, much like Igor Fokin. Street performers are an important part of, again, the fabric of the community here in the square.
I want to go back to your role as the stewards of the public space, and if you speak broadly about that, but also you had this really amazing story which was reported in the local paper in the Cambridge Chronicle about this guy named Michael who was unhoused, as you say, and died. And what was that story? It was really an incredible story, and
Yeah.
you told us about it a while ago, and it really just striking.
Yeah.
What was
So
that all about?
Michael was unhoused, and sadly died in front of the Bank of America building at 1414 Mass Ave last November. Died without any identification, no shoes, little jacket, no belt, no socks, no money, nothing. And He was, we knew him from being at various shelters, but he never gave anyone his last name. So he was found on that early that morning in November, a cold morning, and one of the people that came upon him was a Harvard student who is a volunteer at the Harvard Square homeless shelter. His name is Cody Christensen, and Cody had been with Michael the night before he died at the Harvard Square homeless shelter, gave him some food, gave him a blanket, and there wasn't enough room, so Michael went out to the front of the Bank of America where he could often be found. So got to the Mount Auburn Hospital and pronounced dead. From there he went to the chief medical examiner's office in Boston. They, along with CPD, tried for months to identify him and couldn't. Cody came to me and said, we need to do something for this gentleman. And he wanted to do like a little memorial service. So I had been in touch with the chief medical officer, and they said, well, until he's identified, we're not going to release the body. And my question was, well, how long does that take? And at what point in time do you release the body? This seems, months go by. So they were pretty adamant that they would not release the body until they had exhausted every possible avenue. And about a month ago, I received notice from them that they were releasing the body to the HSBA if we wanted to claim him. So I put the word out to our membership, and immediately members started getting in touch with me saying, Keith Funeral Home said, we have a casket, we'll provide the hearse, and if you can find a burial plot. And then Payne Senior Services, Liz Agulo, contacted us and said, I have a burial plot, I just need my board to approve to allow Michael to be buried there. And then, of course, First Parish, where Michael could often be found, in and around the parish, in the old burial ground. And they said, we'll be happy to do a service. So on Thursday, the 30th of June, the day before, on the 29th, Tim Keefe from Keefe Funeral Home went to pick up Michael's body downtown, or wherever he was, and brought him and prepared the body, and had a beautiful casket with just the name Michael, because we don't know his last name. So etched Michael on the casket, and it was a beautiful service, and we worked very closely with Commissioner Elo, our police commissioner, who spoke at the service. Cambridge Police provided a motorcade from the church to the cemetery. Cambridge Police stood by the hearse during the service. And then this, interesting group of people from Honk, our local Second Line Social Aid and Pleasure Society brass band.
Honk is one of those festivals that if you haven't been, you should go to, because it's something else.
Incredible, right? So the Honkers reached out, and they always perform this Second Line funeral march, and they asked if they could participate, and I said, of course. So Honk volunteers, 12 or 14 of them, came, and they played the funeral march as part of the beautiful ceremony. And the community joined together to memorialize this man who now has a final resting place.
That is just an incredible story all by itself. But also, and I think you get a sense, but you were right in the middle of that. And I think dealing with the state agencies about the release of the body was no easy task. And yet, to provide this human being with dignity in his final resting is amazing, really amazing. Down Palmer Street, as we're looking down Palmer Street, in that far right-hand corner is a very famous club that's also part of the folklore of Harvard Square.
Yeah, Passim.
And that is called Passim.
Where Joan Baez and Dylan and so many others played.